Okay, this could end up being its own little mini-series. All right, let's do this.
Then you add the intimacy of a kiss or whatever else it might be, and now that bond, what I thought was growing us even closer, but it was actually just carving a deeper hole in my heart. This went on for years, and I did it on my own. I thought that God was upset with me. I thought that he was mad at me. I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and that's usually when you have guilt and shame, you hide.
Ditto, except that I didn't think God was mad at me. I had experienced so much death in my life that I just didn't think anything mattered. I don't believe anything has a reason or a cause. That wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted oblivion. That's what I was craving. I was craving oblivion, to cease to exist. And to cease to exist doesn't mean, self-delete. No, it means to have never felt the pain in the first place. That's what oblivion means. It means that you never existed in the first place, so you never had that suffering, that longing, that isolation, that loneliness, the otherness. There is pain in people, and it drives them. I've escaped that pain maybe 3 times in my life, but to escape it, I had to give everything up in my life, and I'm currently in the process of doing that again. And I told myself after the last time I did it, I wouldn't do it again because the last time it was so painful and so hard. But no one's doing this to me. No one makes me sin or make mistakes or make choices. I do all this to myself. It's not the devil. It's not Satan. It's not Lucifer. It's not Baal. It's not Aziel. My sins are my own, and they are before me always. And only God can forgive that. Only Jesus. But there's a process to it, and that includes forgiving yourself, because you have to be the one to do the forgiving as well. You have to forgive others. You have to forgive everyone for everything they've done to you. Everything they've done to you, you got to forgive. And I had a lot of forgiving to do.
And that's what I was doing. I really believe that if I went to my parents, that they'd be like, Kim, you're just called to celibacy. And God bless the religious, but at that age, I was not ready to listen about celibacy at all. And so for me, I already put the answer of what everybody was going to say. I already had it. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep it to myself. And so now, after about 2 years of doing this, I was just running around from one person to another, always one woman at a time.
Say that I was also a one woman kind of guy. I did eventually get into polyamorous relationships, which is a little bit more touchy. Usually it was a triad, although I did once try a polycube. But I did a few triad relationships, usually a girl and she had a girlfriend. So the girl who I would date was with me exclusively, so she didn't date any other guys. And the girl that she was with her exclusively. She wouldn't date other women. And I did 3 relationships like that. Like I said, I did one polycube. That one didn't last very long, and it was kind of a disaster. But I did make a great friend out of that. And I did try open relationships for a while. Those were meaningless and not really, those didn't really work. And the specific person I was with, she was beautiful and she had gone through a lot of struggles and she had really improved herself. And we were in this open relationship and I eventually cut it off because I felt I was disrespecting her as a person. And she said that, she was like, she didn't feel that way, that she really loved it, that she really liked the openness and the freeness of the relationship. And she liked how we were good for each other or whatever, that we made each other feel good. But I told her, I didn't feel good anymore, that treating her like an object wasn't okay. So that was the end of that. Okay, let's keep going.
But they never wanted to be in that committed relationship that I wanted, but yet I didn't want a committed relationship on the exterior because I didn't want to deal with what that might have to look like with telling and sharing.
I should also share that if we're going to talk about this. So condoms are not allowed in Catholicism, to put it plainly, without too many caveats. And I was scared of commitment. Extremely scared. So I was extremely lonely, so I wanted someone there, but I was extremely scared of commitment. So for all of these women, I was using condoms or some kind of birth control. And now that I'm older, me and my wife were both older, and she has fertility issues, I'll just put it that way, because of a cancer thing. And there were plenty of women who were in love with me, who I wasn't worthy of, and they weren't worthy of me. We were not good for each other. That would have been willing to have a kid with me. But because I was pursuing the wrong person intentionally, I didn't want to have a kid with them. So I regret that now.
Sharing with everybody else. And so it was really this internal war. I had just recently wrote a book called Restless Heart. And that is not a plug to buy a book. That is just because it's exactly what my heart was. It was absolutely restless. I ran from girl to materialism. It wasn't just homosexuality, you guys. It was everything. It was anything and everything that my flesh could go for. It was money, it was stuff, it was cars, it was what other people thought of me, right? I was living completely on the exterior. And it was
As was I. I was spending money like it was water. And I was going to a different party or a different club every night. I was very jealous of my friends who were more successful than me in these pursuits. Not pursuits of excellence, not pursuits that laid a foundation or a future, but the guy who could pick up a girl a night. I thought I wasn't good enough because I could only pick up a girl a week, or I only had one girlfriend every 6 months, and we had a stable relationship for 6 months. So I was jealous of the guy who could get a different girl every day. I was jealous of my female friends who could go to work high or whatever, mess up and go get a job at the very next place, who could steal and rob and get out of problems. I was jealous of their freedom, of their ability to use their femininity as a weapon. I was jealous of their boyfriends who they were using because they wouldn't use me. The girls, the women wouldn't use me because they were my friends. We would enjoy the spoils of their proclivities, of their misadventures. I remember one time this guy had spent, I don't know, maybe $1,000 just trying to get a hostess at a club to get with him. And we take his money and we blow it all on food and drinks for ourselves. I wasn't a good guy.
really hard because I didn't want to give up God. That was one of the biggest wrestles for me, is I didn't want to walk away from God.
Through all of that, I always believed in God. And through my searching, through esoterica and through other religions, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, even Islam, I always found a fatal flaw. There was something there that just wasn't true, that didn't work, that wasn't applicable, wasn't utilitarian enough for me. Until I came back to reading the Bible. Every time I read the Bible, I found truth. Every single time. Enough to where it drove me to read it 7 times total. The first 3 times, every time was so revelational that it changed my life every single time I read it. The subsequent times, not so much. It became more academic. It became more questioning and prodding. Now what has that power is the Liturgy of the Hours and the Church Father writings. That now has that kind of power over me now, where I learn something new and it completely changes the way that I think or the way that I live, which, thank God, had to quote a Protestant idea, constantly reforming, constantly being born again. But I never gave up on God. I never doubted God. Even in my most sinful, wicked place, and even in my lowest of my low, I always believed in God. I'm grateful for that.
Didn't want to do what he was calling and inviting me to do, but I also didn't want to turn away from him and pretend like he wasn't real and that he didn't love me. So it was really a battle that I will never forget. It wasn't until, well, there's a lot that happened in between. I ended up moving to Ethiopia, as Aaron had shared, and started a nonprofit over there serving widows and orphans. When I was 23, sold everything I had, and it was there that God encountered my heart. I realized that I was not put on this earth just for myself.
For me, it was 25. At the end of 24, I believe it was the end of 24. It's been a long time now. I was bleeding internally. The girlfriend I was dating at the time ended up being not such a good person. And we broke up when I was going through that. And that was a very hard time for me. And I spent my entire life savings and threw my future away. I quit school, a college career, and I had to refine myself. I thought I was going to be dead at the end of 6 months. It was a scare of stomach cancer. It ended up just being H. pylori. There was still a chance that there was cancer or it was cancerous, especially given how long I bled internally and how much blood I was bleeding. But through a Prev pack, which is an antibiotic and an antiviral and a radiated pill, and I got down to looking like a skeleton. And that's just a radiated pill. I couldn't imagine if they had found something. But through the Prev pack, eventually my blood work came clean. I didn't have to go to chemo. I didn't have to go through any of that. But by the time that I got the all clear, my life was over. So even though I was physically alive, I had killed everything that I had built up until that point. And a very good friend of mine, and I will mention her name, Monica, called me at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning as I was throwing away the last of my savings. She was just like, "Hey, Ramon, I just went through this thing. This thing just happened, and I had an urge to call you." And that conversation saved my life. I really do feel that God had her call me. I woke up the next day, like literally 24 hours later, went to my bank account and checked to see what was left, and there was like $5,000 left or something like that. And I had to rebuild a life from that. That wasn't easy. That was hard. Yeah. And I still didn't go back to church, by the way, at that time. I want to be very clear. That wasn't where I went back to church. When I went back to church was because of Paul and a problem that I had with Paul. And then a promise that I made to God. But we'll get to that at some point.
I realized that whatever gifts he may have given me, few as they are to be given back to him for his glory and for other people. And so it was then that my heart started to kind of get out of this selfish rhythm that I've been practicing so much. Came back, started dating this guy, and ended up getting married to him. And there was a lot of wrestles in between those years, and the book does unpack all of them. But I did go to counseling as well. I went to a Catholic counselor, and because I didn't know what to do, so I hired the counselor on my own, said, I've got these desires for women. I know it's not right. And y'all, I got this message. It's not verbatim. It's not exactly what he said. But what I recall and what I remember in my heart and my mind was that it's okay, that God loves me. You know, it was really hard because I wanted to believe that. I knew that God loved me. That wasn't really a question ever in my mind. It was more, does he love what I'm doing, right? And so that was something I wrestled with. And when people would tell me it was okay, it just never settled. Though I wanted to believe that what I was doing was okay, it never settled in my heart. And so after years of wrestling and going back and forth, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be single all my life. I am not going to be a nun. So that leaves one option. I'm going to get married. And this guy that I was dating was phenomenal, just a sold out lover of Jesus. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to do this. And I want to make it really clear. Before I married him, I got on my knees the night before my wedding. And I said, Jesus, mark my words. I will never cheat on this man with a woman. It's a really weird prayer to pray. I didn't ask for God's help. I told him I wouldn't do it because that was the desire in my heart. I wanted to be faithful. I wanted to be faithful. I'm not blaming my desires. You have a choice. We all have a choice what we do with our desires. But I never asked for God's help. It wasn't even a year into our marriage that I cheated on him. And I cheated on him with a married woman. So you can't imagine what that does to a soul that desires to live for the Lord, but doesn't know how to deal with their struggles, their temptations, and who tries to do it on their own. I don't want anybody to feel bad for me. I made choices, and then I had to walk out those choices with some repercussions. And I'm not going to unpack all of it, of what happened, but I will say that after I got an annulment, my husband did want to work on the marriage, and I just knew that I wasn't dealing with things, that I had really been running from a call, possibly a call to the single life, and that I let fear make decisions for me, that I allowed fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being alone, all the fears to bring me into marriage, a calling that I don't believe I was called to.
So, that's a good opening to talk about my current situation. I'm going to use it to talk about my second situation, which is after everything that happened, I rebuilt a life as a martial arts instructor. I ended up becoming a third person in a polytriad. So, recap, teenage years, identified as pansexual, then ended up identifying as straight based on my dating history, or who I was attracted to anyway. Wouldn't call it dating if you can't even get past a third date. But then after 25, I got into a relationship with someone, and we were together. We lived together, everything, well over 10 years. No, a little bit under 10 years, because I would meet someone else at that very end. So let's say till 32. So from 25 to 32, I was with this person. And again, we were a triad. Then it became where it got kind of looser, and it became like an open thing. And we never defined our relationship. I want to be very clear. We never sat down and had that whole important conversation. We just simply were, and we lived this way, and we met each other's other significant others and that kind of thing. And eventually I met somebody who was completely wrong for me, but not wrong for me the way that these other self-destructive relationships were wrong, just the wrong person. And she pursued me. We became monogamous, and that relationship self-destructed very quickly. And I don't think I don't like the way that she treated other people, but I don't think I treated her with the amount of dignity and dedication I should have. It was toward the end of that relationship that I moved back to my house. I had been couch surfing and living with girlfriends, and so now that the girlfriends were gone, I needed a place to live. I came back home, and I lost my job. The place that I was working at went under. A little bit more complicated than that, but you get the picture. So I was unemployed, and my dad started bringing pizza and donuts to me in the morning, afternoon, night. He knows my family history. He knows our family history. He knows what went on my mother's side of the family. And I know better too. But I get fat. I mean, I get really fat. I'm almost 300 pounds by the time that it's done, and I lose my ability to walk. I have a 14A1C. The doctors don't understand how I'm alive, let alone how I'm walking. And getting the diagnosis, getting to the point where they would even check for these things was a hassle because I was cramping and because they were trying to treat that. No one was looking at my blood work. And finally, a doctor was like, well, let's just see if you're diabetic. And of course, I was. And so I used to be a personal trainer. So I did exactly what a personal trainer would do. I gave myself a routine. And I used to help people through recovery. So I knew how to do a recovery program. So I started off with 1 minute a day, 2 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, just going through for 60 days. I put myself through a 60-day program until I was able to run, not just walk, but run for 1 mile. That doesn't sound like a big accomplishment, but believe me, it was. But I still couldn't bend my legs. I could use them, but I couldn't bend them. So I made a promise to God that if I could kneel for 1 hour without cramping, I would go back to church. And I got there. I reopened my studio for personal training. Studio is kind of the wrong word, but whatever. I reopened my business and I started getting customers again. I didn't have as many customers this time around. And we focused, instead of on martial arts and weightlifting, we focused on hiking. And we would go off for half a day hikes, 3 hours to 4 hours at a time. And we'd go on different adventures, go to different places. And the person who, one of my main clients, ended up turning into a really great friend of mine. Another client at that time ended up kind of self-destructing, so I had to remove him from my life, which I hope I can one day. He's reached out to me a few times, so I hope I can one day reach out to him. But I got my life back together, and things were great for 3 years. I found religion. I converted back into the Catholic Church. I had a great life, and then I met my wife. We'll talk that when she talks that.
And so this was something I had to deal with, and I didn't want to drag him through it. I'm not a proponent of divorce, and I'm not saying I even made the right decision. But at that moment, I felt like it was, and I felt like it would have been selfish to actually stay in the marriage with him when I didn't feel called to be married in the first place. After the annulment, I actually started dating women openly, and was out, as they called it. Had a lot of talks with family, went back to counseling. My family did the most beautiful job of loving me while not loving what I was doing. See, I know that a lot of people, there's a phrase that goes around, love the sinner, hate the sin. But I know when I was living in the lifestyle, when I was dating women open and out, that hearing that phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin, it just hurt. It put my walls up, like instantly.
So part of what I kind of left this out when I told the story of my teenage years, because we were drinking underage. The only place we could go to we could always go to Mexico, because in Mexico there's no one cares. But for the most part, we would go to gay clubs because they wouldn't card us. But when the culture changed, I lived a very, I guess we'd call it now queer, but that was a very offensive term back then. But I lived a very queer lifestyle for most of my life. And when I became 33 and I got back into religion and I read the Bible for that third time, and I had that problem with Paul, with his apparent misogyny and anti-Semitism, that was a real challenge for me, because I had fallen into the trap of believing in the Church of Nice. And that was an important hurdle for me to get over. Protestants like to use the word convicting and discernment, but it was important to be challenged like that for my faith to reignite. Not that it had died, but to put extra fuel into my faith and to make those embers burn bright. So I'm very grateful for the challenges that are in the Bible, because that helped me grow my faith and helped me become more dedicated to God.
It was like, okay, hate and sinner. Like, those are the words that popped out to me.
But one of the things that pushed me and my friends away from religion was the way that quote-unquote Christians talk to us. Part of the story that I left out about the people who picked on me, and they were Christian. They weren't kind of sort of Christian. They were the quarterback, the star player, the star football player. This is Texas, so football is important. The religious person, the outspoken Fellowship of Christian Athlete person. These are the people who tormented me and my friends. These are the people that I beat up when I got stronger than them. And I saw these people as my enemy. I've said before that we had rocks thrown at us and we were spit on for being diverse, for being odd, for being queer. And going to church, where now these people were adults and they had their own struggles with drug addiction or infidelity or whatever, and they were trying to catch their faith back, was a struggle for me. And forgiving them, and I had already forgiven them in my heart, but forgiving some of these people in person is way different than forgiving them in the abstract. And I know how much these words can hurt. The F slur, the sinner, the devil, and how it becomes a joke. How when people say that to you enough times, you don't care. It becomes a point of pride, and pride is the problem.
And keep in mind, you guys, yes, I knew a lot about God. Right? I knew all the Bible stories. I grew up in the faith with parents who radically loved the Lord, but my parents couldn't radically love him for me, right?
Let me mention that. My dad is a member of the Knights of Columbus. He prayed the rosary every day, multiple times a day, every day. He prayed the rosary every day, but he had his own flaws. He had his own failings as a human. And all I saw was hypocrisy. The problem is two wrongs don't make a right. So I have a friend of mine who's agnostic, and one of the reasons why he's agnostic, well, at the time, one of the reasons why he was atheist is because of his mother's hypocrisy. So my dad was an alcoholic and a workaholic, and his mom was a manipulator and a liar. And we saw that, and it was a hurdle to overcome to return to the faith. He returned to the faith twice, but twice he's left because he can't live with the hypocrisy that he sees among Christians. The hate that he sees come from Christians. And he's not a soft guy. He's a trucker. He's a tough dude. We met as fellow fighters. We were both in martial arts, put it that way, and we did some tournament stuff and some local underground fighting stuff together. And eventually we trained together. And I love that man as a brother. But he could not get over the hypocrisy that he sees in Christians, the hate that he sees in Christians. I have another friend of mine who, that's the exact reason why he's not a Christian today. It's not about believing or not believing in God for him. It's about, he looks at the behavior of the Christians and the hatred that comes from Christians, and he says he doesn't want any part of that. So I think something like this is incredibly important. Mind you, for those that are watching this and don't get the context, this is at a Catholic conference. She talks to Christian communities. This is not an atheist coming out thing. This is a Catholic conference for young Catholics. College age, I believe, college age Catholics.
There comes that personal decision that I want to know Jesus personally. And so I didn't encounter Christ in that way. And so for me, my family kind of dealing with me and walking through this with me, it was super difficult. It was super, super difficult to hear my brothers say, Kim, this lifestyle you're living is not of God. Like, he has better for you. It's really hard when your two brothers are married, and they're telling you that the lifestyle I'm choosing to live. And I remember telling him, I'm like, I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to like women. I didn't. I prayed, you guys, I prayed almost daily that God would take my desires for women away, daily. And he never did. And so I would tell my brothers, I've prayed that God would take this. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to pretend like it's not there. I've tried to date men. Look who I married. He's wonderful. I don't know what to do, right? To have someone who's married tell you to be single is really hard. I don't know. It was hard for me to hear, right? Where are the single people telling me that maybe weren't in the religious life, that were telling me that there's a joy that's still found walking with Christ? And I didn't have that. I know my mom told me that Jesus is enough for you, Kim. And I said, really, Mom? If Jesus is enough for me, then why are you married to Dad? Now, I didn't mean that sarcastic. It was just true. Somebody telling me when they're married that Jesus is enough, but yet you got married. And her response, as wise as she is, she said, because my calling was marriage. She said, Kim, you just need to trust Jesus. You need to just trust him. You don't have to, but I pray that you do. So I still continued to date women. I was wrestling. I did not want to be in the Word. I was still going to Mass all the way through this because I did not want to separate from God. I did not.
So I stopped going to church at 13 and I didn't go back until 33. That doesn't mean that I never attended Mass. I would every once in a while, especially as a teenager, go to midnight Mass, Christmas Mass, and I would go to Easter Sunday, mostly for my family. And of course, any funeral that I attended was usually a Catholic funeral, although not all of them were. And any wedding I attended was usually a Catholic wedding, but again, not all of them were. So I did still have some exposure to church, but when I say I left the church, I left the church. I was not I was not a practicing Catholic in any kind of way. The only thing that kept me from becoming a humanist is that I got stuck on a branch of humanism that is called secular humanism, and I couldn't deny God. I knew God was real, partially because of my experiences and partially just by my own reason. But my experiences had taught me, and God's grace, the Holy Spirit had taught me that God was real. So I never denied God, which again, thank God for that. But I went from a very dark childhood to a darker teenage life, to a messy adult life. And it wasn't until my 30s that things began to get better. And that's all thanks to God. It's God who saved me. I didn't save myself.
I was actually afraid of how far I would go if I did actually fully walk away from him. And so I always had this pull back to him. But that free will, man, I'm so thankful that he gave it to me, but at times I wished he would take it away. It wasn't until I got cheated on by the last girl that I dated that the Lord woke me up.
So I'm not going to tell you that I've never relapsed. The alcoholism seems to be fairly under control. I don't like drinking more than one drink at a time. I don't like getting drunk. So for the most part, I don't drink. I spent a good amount of time trying to learn and develop self-control when I was gaining my ability to walk back. So that has seemed to have lasted so far. It's been 10 years since I've let alcohol control me. But that doesn't mean that I've never indulged in alcohol, and it doesn't mean that I've never drank too much since then. I have gone out with friends where, it's not a ton of beer anymore. My tolerance has gone down a lot, but where I'll have one too many and I will have to call it a night, which to most people, that's not a problem. To most people, it's one too many and you called it a night. Congratulations, you're responsible. But coming from a place where I was deep into alcoholism, every time I do that, it's not just simply, I'm not just risking my health for that night. It's not like 30 years from now I'm worried about kidney disease or liver disease. I'm risking my behavior and my soul. Strip clubs, I have, for the most part, been able to move away from completely. There was an incident about a year and a half ago where I was deeply unhappy because of the incident, and I started going to strip clubs almost every day. Me and my wife talked about it. I had invited her to come with me a few times, and she staunchly just said no and told me to pull myself together and told me to make a change, and I did. So I appreciate my wife for that, and it's part of why not just that, but other reasons, part of why I think God put her in my life. She helps me make better decisions.
And it was October 17th, 2014, and I said, Jesus, I surrender. I am done. I am done pretending to be God. I'm done pretending that I know what is best for my life. I give you everything. See, when I was 23, I moved to Ethiopia. I sold my house, my car, everything I had, but I held on still to pieces. I held on to my future, and I held on to fear.
So the first time I changed my life, I gave everything up. And then somehow everything came back. I got like everything back and more, actually. The second time I changed my life was not my choice. The second time, once the doctor said, we think it's cancer, my life spiraled out of control. My alcoholism spiraled out of control. And waking up from that, I had to build a life up from scratch. It's probably the hardest thing I've had to do until what I'm doing currently. The third time I had to rebuild my life was after I lost my ability to walk. To be fair, my father was enabling the problem, but it was not his choice, or it was not his choices that condemned me to diabetes. It was mine. I could have said no to the donut. I could have gone and walked. I could have done anything. And instead I did nothing. I just wallowed in self-pity. And that was humiliating to know that the very disease that had taken so many members of my family, I witnessed over 100 deaths in my family, and both my mother and father's side combined growing up. And then more deaths happened after I was an adult. But diabetes practically wiped out my family. I knew better than to do what I was doing, and I still did it. I still overindulged in food as a coping mechanism for failure that was my life. And the life that I built, the wife that I chose, the career that I had, became everything until someone acting like I used to act came into my life and destroyed all the peace that I had. He eventually got in trouble for it. He eventually had to change his life because of his decisions. But it was like looking at a mirror darkly. It was a shattered image that I did not want to see. And I knew that I needed to make a change, but I wasn't brave enough. I was scared about what would happen. What would happen to this house? What would happen to my dad? By then my dad already had Alzheimer's. My dad was already sick. I was already taking care of him but I was paying for his care with nurses and everything with this job. And I was going to China. My wife's Chinese, for those that don't know. I was traveling. I was doing all this stuff. I had this really cool muscle car. I was living this great life. So I was scared to say no. And then finally, now over a month ago, I had to compromise my morals for someone that I respected, and I couldn't do it. And I told him no, and I quit my job. Now, it is absolutely true. I had to quit my job anyway because of my father. My father's nurse wanted more money than I was currently paying her. I was already paying her way more than the industry average. But because his hearing had now finally gone, she wanted more pay. So I let her go, which meant that someone needed to be here at the house. So it had to be me. I don't know what I'm going to do for money. I don't know what I'm going to do for work. I'm trying to get a job going, having little hiccups as I'm trying to do it. It's already been a month and I'm not yet employed. But I couldn't lie to myself, and I couldn't compromise anymore. And something inside me said enough. And I said no, and I walked away from money. I walked away from opportunity to take care of my dad. I can't explain it, and I don't know how things are going to work out. I just know I have to trust in God and trust in his will.
And holding on to those things, he can't have that fullness that he wants to pour out into my life when I'm holding back from him. And so I was holding back, but on October 17th, 2014, I said, I give it all to you. It's all yours, because I'm making a mess. I'm making a mess of my own life. I'm making a mess of other people's lives. And I don't want to do this anymore. This is not why.
And that is also true. By holding on to that job, I was making a mess of my wife's life. My wife's career had taken off. We have a home and a life in another country. And I was holding her back and myself back by being scared to be in the situation that I am in now. So, like I said, I walked away, put it all in the hands of God. And I've sinned since then. Okay, I've messed up since then. I'm not perfect. Temptation comes, sin comes. But I believe in God's forgiveness. I believe in the message of Jesus Christ. And I submit myself to his will. So I can only hope that I make the right choices. And that's it.
Why you created me. You guys, that was one of the most radical experiences I had with God. He came in a personal, real way and touched my life. Now, I did not transform and become not human, but I told him I wanted more of him and less of the world. I started getting into the word, worship music, started going to daily mass. I was like, God, whatever looks like you, smells like you, I want it. I want it. Show me a different way, please, and show me that you're better than everything I've been doing. Every day since October 17, 2014, he has showed me that he is better, but not every day since then have I chose him. I would love to say that since October 17th, I've just been his, but that would be lying. It has been a struggle. It continues to be a struggle. But see, unlike my prayer the day before I got married, my prayer now every single day is Jesus be my strength. You guys, I still have flesh, right? I still have desires. I still have temptations, right? If it's not for women, it's prideful stuff. It's whatever, all the things of the world, right? I need him every day. Jesus did not die on Calvary Hill so that he could be a one-hit wonder. This was not a one-time thing in my life where I experienced him and now boom, magically I'm okay. And what I had to realize through a lot of falls, I don't even like to call them falls because I almost knew what I was doing, you guys. I would love to say I didn't know, yet to some degree I didn't. But every time Jesus has showed me how good he is. It says in his word that the kindness of the Lord leads us to repentance. The kindness.
You know, that's something, and I've talked about this in debates with my atheist friends on stream. You're liable for what you know. Ignorance is not an excuse, of course, but you're liable for what you know. I've been studying the Bible for a very long time, and I've been studying the Church Fathers for a long time, and I've studied the ecumenical documents, everything from Vatican II to the First Ecumenical Council, to a lot of other stuff that most Catholics don't either have access to or don't care to research. I've spent the time to learn those things. So when I sin now, I know I'm sinning. That's a heartbreaking thing.
Of the Lord. See, I was always afraid. I wasn't excited for heaven. I was afraid of hell. There's a big difference. I forget exactly where it is, but in the scriptures, it says that perfect love casts out fear. And the one who still has fear is not yet perfected in love. And I'm realizing today, as I continue to surrender my life to the Lord, as I continue to give him every desire, all these things that come or things that have been, that he is showing me a perfect love. See, I think when we have the wrong idea of God the Father, when we think he's angry at us, then we really don't want to run to him. I actually can't speak for anyone else. I'll speak for myself. I didn't want to run to him because I didn't know how good he was. Now speaking all over the place, I have a lot of people come up to me and ask questions, and I love it. I welcome it. I wish I had someone, when I was struggling, I wish I had someone that I could go to and be like, dude, what about this? And just be real. No sugarcoating, no junk over the top. Just give me the real stuff, please. I may not do it, but at least tell me the truth. And so this woman encountered me once at the airport, and she says, you know what? I know who you are, and Jesus loves sinners. He ate with sinners. I said, oh my goodness, absolutely. And he eats with me still every day, but he never once celebrated the sin. See, we want to be really careful, you guys, of turning Jesus into a hippie. And we want to be, at the same token, really careful of turning him into Hitler. See, he wasn't like, hey, peace and love, bro, everything's good, we're all good, let's sing together with a little guitar strum in the back. It's not at all Jesus of the gospel. And then on the same other side, he wasn't, you're going to burn in hell. What you did is wrong and you're going to burn in hell. There's a reality. He is just judge, but he is merciful, right? And so when we separate the truth and the love of God, we've actually separated the very fibers of who God is. And I'm telling you, we've recreated Christ, and a recreated Christ, a counterfeit Christ, saves no one. I have no intention, when I said yes to coming here, I have no intention to hurt anybody's feelings, to make anyone feel like they are not loved, like they are not appreciated. But I also didn't come here to just pat you on the head and say everything's good. The kindness of the Lord draws us to repentance. God loves you. Whatever your struggle is, whatever my struggles are, he loves you, he loves me. I used to think that how I acted would kind of regulate the heart of God. That if I did more good stuff, if I prayed more, that God would love me more. And that might sound good in our head, and it might work that way with some people in our human relationships, but I do not have the power, and neither do you, to change the heart of God. He created you and he created me, and he does love us, and we come into his family through the waters of baptism, and we walk that salvation out through believing day after day after day. But I don't want you to think that you have to earn his love. See, I didn't run back to him because I thought he was mad at me. I thought he was upset with all the things I was doing. Jesus never celebrated the things I was doing, but he wanted to be my strength. And even today, he wants to be my strength with the things I struggle with. And he wants to be yours. You guys, there's so many messages out there right now. There's so many messages. And I pray that if you are in the Word of God and if you are in the presence of Christ and you have the Holy Spirit dwelling within you, that you do not accept those counterfeit messages that will bring you down a very wide and well-traveled path. I went down it myself. I am not standing here to speak condemnation. I'm standing here as one sinner, one broken person, maybe talking to other broken people. That's it. And I think, there's a beautiful saying, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but it's somebody had said once that actually Christianity is just one beggar telling another beggar where to find food. You guys, we have a Savior who loves us. I don't care what you've done. I don't care how horrible, how much shame, how much guilt. I've been there, and I've even been there recently. But the moment you give it to him, the moment you place it in his hands and you say, I give this to you. See, my prayers all the way through, Jesus, take this same-sex attraction. Jesus, take my desires for women. Take this, take that, right? Yes, I know we have a God that gives and takes away, but real love is giving and receiving. And he promises in his word that whatever we give him, he receives, you guys. He died on the cross to take upon the heaviness that we try to fix ourselves. Please don't make the mistakes that I've made. Please, whatever you're dealing with, whether it be same-sex attraction, whether it be pornography, lust, pride, whatever the things, we all struggle. I told you that bio you heard, yes, that is the frosting. But inside that cake, dude, there's still stuff that the Lord is working out. But when you can be transparent and you can be real and authentic with the Lord, your life will be transformed. He will transform you. You will not transform yourself. We have the opportunity and the invitation to give our free will back to the Lord, to say, just as Mary did, our own personal fiat, right? Our own personal, your will be done, not mine.
I think that is an incredibly powerful message. Again, I almost hate to bring it back to what we're actually talking about here, because her message is so much more important than what I'm about to say. But I wish Trent Horn could share this message, truly. Jimmy Akin has, from time to time, shared this message, especially when he talks about his wife who died. This is a much more powerful message and a deeper message and a truer message than any condemnation or warning from Trent Horn. There's a person in my chat right now who's talking hate against LGBTQ people, because the whole reason for this series, because I'm defending Father Casey Cole against some statements that Trent Horn made. Reason in Theology, Michael Lofton, went through the video with a fine-tooth comb because someone else, exactly what I was warning about, took Trent Horn's words and used them against Father Casey Cole as a condemnation against all people who think like Father Casey Cole. And Reason in Theology, Michael Lofton, did a very great job of showing how Father Casey wasn't being heretical. He was saying something that they disagreed with apologetically, theologically, but not something that went against dogma. But people like this lost soul in my comment section, like this angry priest who is throwing words like heresy and blasphemy against another priest out of anger, they need forgiveness too. They need guidance as well. Like I said, I'm a sinner. I sin all the time. I mess up all the time, man. I need constant mercy and forgiveness. When I was defending Father Casey Cole and correcting Trent Horn, it wasn't because I dislike Trent Horn. I love Trent Horn. His arguments in my circles are profoundly bad, but his passion for the faith and his knowledge of not only apologetics, but of the faith is profound and not only useful, but necessary for someone to have that. We need someone like Trent Horn in the world. But the way that his words can be misapplied, the way that his facial expressions and body language can be read, give power in their minds to people who want to spread hate. It becomes an allowance. It becomes not a command, but a gesture of, go ahead, I give you permission. And that's the wrong message. Just like when I'm tempted to drink and I know I can cut myself off, it's the wrong message when my friends say, yeah, you're doing fine, you're controlling yourself, have another. I love my friends, but that's the wrong message. The right message is the one I didn't want to hear, which is put down the drink and go home. You have a wife and a kid and a dad who needs you. The easy message is do your job, lie, cheat, steal, make profit, and it's all good because you're serving the greater good of your coworkers. The harder job is don't compromise the truth. Say no and walk away, because you have to take care of people who need you more than you need a new Xbox or a new video game or a fancy new car. Compromising my morals won't get me into heaven, but ignoring the people who need me will mean that I'm not there when they do. So while this video, her video especially, is meant to tell you to have compassion and mercy on the sinner, whether they're LGBTQ or straight or whatever, whether it's sodomy or adultery, be charitable and merciful. The other message is also true, which is to be charitable and merciful to us who are calling for charity and mercy, and for us who are making that call to forgive those who are calling for hate. I could have been more charitable with my correction of Trent Horn. Yes, I do think he harbors some misunderstandings on LGBTQ issues, and some of that is deep-rooted in his view of the lifestyle. And he shows that in faces of disgust. But like I said in an earlier video, you feel what you feel, man. You can't help that. But because of that, I don't think he's the right person to speak on this issue. I think someone like her, Kim, is a better choice. And again, I'm not saying I'm the right choice. That's not what I'm saying here. But I think Father Casey's message is the correct message. And I think Father Bishop Robert Barron's message is the correct message. And I think Father Mike Schmidt's message is the correct message. And I want Trent Horn to get onto that. I'm not expecting him to get to where Father Casey Cole is or where Kim is, but he could at least be on the same level as Bishop Robert Barron and Mike Schmidt, because Trent Horn has the ability to do that. All right, I'm going to stop it here, but forgive everyone for everything. The person who hates you because you're gay is lost. The person who strikes out against you because you represent a fear that they have is confused. They don't understand their own desires. Forgive them. I know, it seems hard, but forgive them. They're going to say horrible and terrible things to you in your struggle. Forgive them. I'm not saying this from the outside. I'm saying as one of you. Forgive them. I love you all. Peace.